Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition monthly town hall conversation. We welcome you on this day, a day in which Christ has made, a day in which we shall rejoice and be glad in it. So thank you all for spending this next hour with us as we are excited about the revisiting of holding still. We ask, Lord, that you keep everybody stay muted and while we do the presentation, and then at the end you will have time for questions. As with all things, we will start off with a prayer, and then I will introduce our facilitators and guests for this afternoon. I should have really said that my name is Kimberly Limore. I am part of the leadership team of the CPMC, and so I welcome you on behalf of them today. So today I have a prayer, as it's called a daily prayer of justice and mercy that was put out by Paulus Prison Ministry that we will pray on this day. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Jesus, united with the Father and the Holy Spirit, give us your compassion for those in prison. Mend in mercy the broken in mind and memory. Soften the heart, the captives of anger. Free the innocent, parole the trustworthy. Awaken the repentance that restores hope. May prisoners' families persevere in their love for them. Jesus, heal the victims of crime. They live with their scars. Live to eternal peace those who die. Grant victims' families the forgiveness that heals. Give wisdom to lawmakers and to those who judge. Instill prudence and patience in those who guard. Make those in prison ministry bearers of your light, for all of us are in need of your mercy. Amen. So again, I welcome you. I had a few more people join us since the prayer. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to revisit again, Holding Still. It is such a powerful documentary. We have had over 3,000 people view it on YouTube and well over 4,000 website views since the premiere event of the documentary film last year. But just as important is the practice of centering prayer, contemplative prison fellowship practice of using centering prayer in places of confinement. We are really looking forward to this update. Right now, I am going to turn it over to Lizzie Udwin, who is going to introduce herself and Artist and Lawrence from the film. Please, if you have any questions, place them in the chat and we will open the session after their presentation. Lizzie, we welcome you to CPMC's town hall on today. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Limore. And thank you so much to Karen Clifton and Karen McNamara, Jared Kinkley, and to Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition for inviting me to speak to you on behalf of Prison Contemplative Fellowship and Ray Leonardini about the resources Prison Contemplative Fellowship developed and is continuing to provide to those who are facilitating centering prayer in prisons and jails, as well as to those who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated and who continue to use Prison Contemplative Fellowship as a resource. I'll refer to Prison Contemplative Fellowship as PCF from here on. Thank you again, Dr. Limore, for your introduction and your prayer, and I would love to get a copy of that prayer. If that can be put in the chat, that would be really great. I'm privileged to share PCF's resources with you and privileged really to share this time with all of you, especially to those who are doing work in prison outreach. We're also very fortunate to be joined today by two of the men in the documentary and short films, Artist Knox and Lawrence Hamilton. Artist and Lawrence have chosen a few of the short films to screen here, and they'll discuss these films with you after we view them later this morning. My name is Lizzie Udwin. I've been working with PCF for about a year as a consultant, assisting the founder, Ray Leonardini, with the day-to-day operations of the organization, as well as working with him to develop the materials that I'll be introducing to you. My sister, Mary Trunk, is the director of the documentary Holding Still, as well as the additional companion films, which we'll show later this morning. I think we're showing 3, yeah. Ray and Mary anticipated that there would be increased interest in centering prayer once the documentary premiered in conjunction with Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition last year. So they decided to utilize valuable and pertinent footage not seen in the documentary. And with the editor of the documentary, Karen McCaleb, they created 13 short films focusing on specific aspects of centering prayer. Ray was also interested in providing a more concise course of study based on his books, as well as the documentary and the short films as a companion to the films themselves. So in addition to working with Ray in the capacity of an administrator, handling daily emails, including requests for resources, helping him to redesign his website and outreach, I worked with him, Mary, and Karen to write the course of study, develop DVDs of the documentary and short films, and upload all of these resources to Adobo, which is an educational platform for those who use tablets in prisons, and I'll talk more about that later. Many of you know who Ray Leonardini is, so you probably know his story, which he relates in one of the short films titled Centering Prayer, the Healing of Core Wounds. In this film, Ray talks about how he discovered the power of centering prayer 4 to 5 years before he began facilitating centering prayer circles in prison. In this film, Ray elaborates how the spiritual journey of divine therapy affected him and how his search for a prayer group brought him into prison because he couldn't find a centering prayer group. Ray went in not as a teacher at the time, but instead he was simply seeking some type of mutual exploration of practicing centering prayer with prisoners. Ray facilitated centering prayer groups in Folsom State Prison for many years and has written books about the practice, which you can find on the PCF website and which I'll point out to you shortly. Ray's goal has always been to try and introduce and support centering prayer groups in as many prisons and jails as possible. He sends his books and the DVDs free of charge to prisoners, volunteers, and chaplains who facilitate centering prayer in prisons. So if any of you are working in prisons and wish to receive books and DVDs, you can contact us through the PCF website. We simply ask that you tell us where you're facilitating centering prayer and provide your complete address in order for us to send the materials to you. One of the things Ray feels strongly about is that all of PCF's resources are simply tools and should be used by facilitators, volunteers, and prisoners as a structure for their own approaches. He feels that there's not one right way to do centering prayer, and no individual or organization should or could outline any one way of facilitating or practicing it. So what I'd like to do today is simply walk you all through the PCF website so you can see where all of the resources are located. As I mentioned before, Ray's priority is to make whatever PCF produces available free of charge to anyone who can use it. So everything has been uploaded to the site and can be viewed and printed with the exception of the DVDs. Some of you have experienced facilitating centering prayer in prisons, and we'd be particularly interested to hear from you how these materials helped you or how you envision them helping you, as well as those in your centering prayer circles. So I'm going to share my screen now. And here we have the homepage featuring the Holding Still, the documentary up top. The homepage gives a brief description of PCF, but from here, I'm going to jump to the pages that provide all of the resources. So you've got the Holding Still film documentary. It's got a page devoted to itself, to the film itself. the course study, screenings, additional resources, and let me just minimize this, and the contact page. So the Holding Still film page is where you can view the film. You'll see a brief description of the film, as well as the names of those who participated in the film, those who supported the film, and where the film has been screened. So this is the Holding Still film page. The course study page has two components. The first is the course of study text, which can be downloaded and printed. And the second page is a page devoted to all of the companion films. So we'll first go to the course of study. And you can click on this. There's a PDF here, which you can download and print. The course of study is based on Ray's books and focuses on three main aspects: the method of centering prayer, the difficult emotions, specifically trauma and toxic shame, and finding God within is the third section. This features the men talking about how centering prayer has affected them and helped them, specifically how they have faced their shame and fears, and to have compassion for not only themselves, but for others. In each of these sections, we've also added a section of suggested readings. And at the end of the course of study, we list all of the companion films. And we have organized them into sections. So you have first section is the actual documentary. Then you have central aspects of centering prayer, concurrent aspects of centering prayer, a section for facilitators, and more background. Now, the section for facilitators, I just want to mention, this isn't strictly just for facilitators. Anyone can view all of these films. We just felt that these films in particular, the ones for facilitators, would provide specific guidance to those who are facilitating centering prayer. So in central aspects of centering prayer, we have what happens in centering prayer. That is how the men practice and what they experience. Our honest notions of God, where you'll see the men talking about their past experiences and relationships with God and the church, and how centering prayer changed their perceptions and opened up new ways of connecting with God. And in toxic shame, I am a mistake, the men talk openly about toxic shame, how it manifested in themselves, and how they're facing it by practicing centering prayer, by opening up to themselves as well as to others. In concurrent aspects of centering prayer, we include topics such as flawed and needy, wherein Paul Dietering tells us about his early childhood and how his past history shaped his behavior as an adult, and how this behavior and identity wasn't adequate to function in society. In I Am More, Lawrence Hamilton talks about his relationship with God and how it has made him understand that he is a good person, and how centering prayer was integral to this process in healing him and allowing him to accept himself. In A Lifelong Presence, Lawrence suggests to those who are in pain to try centering prayer, to listen to the silence and to what he calls the essence inside of us. And in The Ultimate Mystery, Paul tells us the most important aspect of centering prayer is one's own individual experience. In the section for facilitators, or for whoever would like to view these films, we have a centering prayer session in Folsom State Prison with Ray narrating what happens in his centering prayer circle. In a centering prayer discussion group, the former inmates depicted in the documentary come together, sit in silence, and talk about a specific topic. And in one facilitator's method, Patty Stadler is featured, and she talks about her centering prayer group at Mule Creek State Prison. And I just want to stress here that, again, Ray wants to impress on people that everyone has their own approach. And then in centering prayer, getting comfortable with the silence, Ray provides background in centering prayer, the process, and its fundamental notions. And I believe we're going to be viewing this particular film later. Finally, two films that provide additional background: The Healing of Core Wounds, which I described earlier, and The Folsom Gardener, featuring Tyrone, a former inmate at Folsom Prison, who talks about the garden as a metaphor for centering prayer, growth, and the spiritual journey. Now, the films can all be accessed via this course of study. You'll see as I hover my mouse over the image, you can click on it, it will go directly to the film. But we have also put them in their own page here under course study, where we've organized them by central aspects, concurrent aspects for facilitators, and more background, and provided the runtimes as well. We produced DVDs with the documentary and all of the films, as well as a printed abridged version of the course of study, which is included in the DVD. And PCF provides these DVDs free of charge to those who are going into prisons and jails and facilitating centering prayer. We also signed an agreement with Adobo, an organization that utilizes tablet technology to deliver free access to educational programming to jails and prisons nationwide. So the documentary, the short films, the course of study, and the 4th edition of Ray's book, Finding God Within, can be found on the Adobo platform. The next page is screenings, and we have 4 sections here. We have a screening guide, and a discussion guide, the holding still film teaser, and promotional images. The screening guide, again, a PDF, which you can click on, download, and print, is a logistical and practical guide for those who wish to screen the documentary in any of the films, either virtually or in person. We provide suggestions for promoting the screening, including the film teaser and promotional images, ideas for invitations and agenda, and follow-up suggestions for both virtual and in-person screenings. And we also provide suggestions for online screening platforms for virtual screenings and equipment needed for in-person screenings. So this is really just a practical and logistical guide to sort of guide you through the steps necessary to hold a screening. For those who wanted to have a panel discussion following the screening, in section 2, we provide a discussion guide, which is basically the course of study, but it's been expanded. So what we include here, in addition to the three components, the method of centering prayer, the difficult emotions, and finding God within, are suggested topics for discussion and suggested questions for a post-screening discussion or panel. And then in sections 3 and 4, we have the holding still film teaser and the promotional images, which you can right-click to download and use for promoting any screenings, if you wish to use any of these for your materials promoting screenings. And then under additional resources, we list all of Ray's publications. We've recently released the 4th edition of Finding God Within. We added a chapter on the welcoming prayer written by Mary Rosowski, and we added a chapter about the documentary and short films. And for those who are facilitating centering prayer, Ray will provide this book as well as his others, including Going Inside and Toxic Shame, free of charge. And you can contact us through the website to request these. Otherwise, you can also purchase a hard copy or a PDF version. But for those who are facilitating centering prayer, and for prisoners as well, who would like any of these books, we provide them free of charge. And then also under additional resources, we have articles, various articles written by prisoners and volunteers, frequently asked questions, and testimonials from families and what prisoners say. We added a new section called Prison Lessons. When Ray goes into Folsom, he prepares a lesson or a topic for discussion. When I began working with Ray, he sent me his lesson files, which I reviewed, organized, and formatted. Here's an example. These can be used as handouts for discussion following centering prayer, or simply as ideas on how to organize your own centering prayer circle. So in this prison lessons section, we're going to continue adding these prison lessons so folks can access them and use them if they find them helpful. So some of you have had an opportunity to view the short films, and I'm sure many of you have seen the documentary and read some of Ray's books. We're very interested in your feedback, particularly whether you find the resources useful. If so, how you use them, and what kind of response, if any, you've received from prisoners themselves. Finally, here is the Contact Us page for those of you who are facilitating centering prayer in prisons and would like a DVD or books. Please remember to tell us where you're volunteering and provide your complete address. And we'd also like to know how you're using the materials and if they're helpful to you and those in your centering prayer circles. What I'd like to do now, I'm going to stop the share here, is screen 3 of the short films. These films are chosen by artist and Lawrence. We'll start with Ray Leonardini and getting comfortable with the silence, and then with a lifelong presence, and finally with I Am More. And following our viewing of these films, artist and Lawrence will talk about the films they've chosen, and then we can open it up to discussion as well as questions.
So the process of centering prayer, the most fundamental notions of centering prayer, I think, are 2 things. The first, it's a receptive type of prayer. It's a fancy word for saying, you don't do anything, God does it all. And you're receptive. You're in a mode of receiving whatever it is that God's sending to you. Most prayer is not receptive. Most prayer is concentrative, where you say, help Aunt Sally, or help my wife, or help my kids. Whereas this is a whole different point of view, fundamentally different point of view. It's holding still in silence. And it's holding still in silence, not as in the absence of noise. It's holding still in silence that's beyond noise, and it's the arena in which the divine speaks to us. Now, like any language, you need to learn its syntax and its grammar and its vocabulary. And I believe there is syntax and a grammar and a vocabulary for silence. And in essence, it's recognizing the difference between your everyday thoughts and the non-ordinary, everyday type of thoughts. That's a little contradictory, but we have all sorts of things bombarding us in our mind. You know, some people call it the monkey mind, and it's true. So things like, I wonder how long I'm going to have to sit in meditation, I'm kind of tired, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch, you know, all the stuff that our mind conjures up. But there's also something else, and it comes out of silence, and it's honestly, it's more a feeling than a thought. Although when we bring it up, it feels like a thought, but it's more of a settling in. It's more of a hunkering down. It's more of a centering. Wherever that center is, you kind of go to that center. And we go to that center naturally. We don't go to that center with intention or willpower. Oh, I'm going to get to the center. No. We get to that center by letting go and continuing letting go. So we let go of thoughts. You know, what's on my grocery list? And did my wife call me last night? And, you know, how are my kids doing? Oh, we just let those things go. We let those things go. And eventually we get into a mode of, I think the best word really is surrender, so that we're not doing any of that stuff. And that's when the centering really starts to happen. It doesn't happen in the first minute or 2 or 3 or 4, but it starts to happen and you feel it. It's like that great big boulder that has been not able to settle into the earth gets twisted just a little bit, and then it settles into the earth. So you know, when I try to teach this stuff, the first thing I say is it's a receptive type of prayer. You just have to sit still, and God's going to take over. And you don't know that yet, and you won't believe it yet, but you will find out that that's exactly what happens. And the second thing is, you're going to think, I can't do this. I see all these guys sitting around here in silence, and they're doing it, but I can't do it. Everybody thinks that. And so when you call it out and say, you know, the first couple of times you do this, all you're going to see are your thoughts. And it's actually an advantage in that, because you recognize how much we're controlled by your thoughts, but you've never alluded to it before. You've never seen that before. And now you're seeing it in spades because that's all you have, or so you think that's all you had. So the technique they found that they used in centering prayer is you use a word. They call it a sacred word. And the word is not a mantra. I know mantras, but it's not a mantra. You know, mantras are wonderful techniques for getting into a meditative state, but it's a concentrative type of meditation. So you clear your mind by concentrating on the mantra. This is not a mantra, as wonderful as a mantra can be. This is simply a reminder that you don't want to dwell on the thoughts. So thoughts come up, you don't even know you're thinking. You follow the thought through. Why did that guy say that to me? You know, what's this problem with me? And then pretty soon we have this wonderful ability for our mind to recognize that we're thinking. So when our mind recognizes, we use the sacred word, it's peace or Lord or whatever, just to get us back to that mode of holding still and letting thoughts come and go. Now, in the first couple of times you do it, or first month or 2 months, whatever, that's all you see. But something is growing inside of you where you see the difference between who you are in some inarticulate way, some non-verbal way, and all the thoughts that are matriculating through your mind. And you keep practicing this, and that space gets larger, 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 larger. So in that space, that's a meditative space, all sorts of wonderful, creative things start to happen. And you never thought you could ever develop a space like that, because most of the time when you try to do that, you're using your willpower. And this is not about willpower, which is wonderful, because most of us don't do well with willpower. We just don't, particularly things like prayer and how to relate to God. We think we have to use willpower, but willpower, because truly, and I say this experientially, I don't say this from a doctrinal point of view, truly, God just wants us sitting there. God's going to take over. And I've seen it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times where God takes over. And guys say to me, I don't know what happened, Ray, but all of a sudden, I don't know where I got the idea, but all of a sudden, I realized, I'm not such a bad guy after all. I know I'm not the best guy in the world, but I'm not the worst either. And honestly, and they kind of whisper, honestly, I could see why God would love me and want what's best for me. Well, that to me is the perfect earmark of somebody who's in a practice. They don't understand what's going on because it's not an intellectual deal. They can't articulate it, narrate it, right? But they're having these divine experiences. That's what I call them anyway. And I think there's all sorts of verifications for that. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to have a denominational background. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm just suggesting, or it's not me that's suggesting, but I think the practice is suggesting that you just look at your own experience and see what plops up. And inevitably, and I've had a lot of guys who don't believe in God, at least they don't believe in the God that's been offered to them, okay? That God that's been offered to them is a God that's saying, yeah, I'll love you, but you got to ask for forgiveness first, and you got to keep asking for forgiveness, and you got to keep your motives clean and clear. We don't want anything messy. And then, I might listen to you. So they're always on their knees and always praying, help me, and I'm sorry, forgive me, I'm sorry. Well, who can relate to that? Over the long term, you get tired of doing that. And I believe that the God that I believe in anyway wants to communicate so much that all you got to do is hold still and then check out your experience, and all of a sudden it starts to happen. It doesn't happen through your brain. It's not a logical conclusion. It happens in your experience. They don't have to make an intellectual leap to faith. They simply have to look at their experience. They don't have to go to me or anybody else, anybody they read or some person that's speaking to them in church, or they just look at their own experience and they see flowers breaking through the cement. Where the heck did this come from? Or another guy. This is why I want to do the film, because these guys are so extraordinary. Their spiritual experiences are so extraordinary that other prisoners need to see this.
like to say to anyone that's feeling the pain, this incarceration, and feeling the weight of their life impacting them, and feeling like maybe there's no hope, if you just try this, just to sit in silence and let your thoughts go by without grabbing you. It's going to be difficult at first because the thought's going to grab you. But just remember your intention to listen to the silence, to listen to the voice of God, to listen to the essence that's inside yourself. And I would pretty much guarantee you that if you are patient enough and you put in the time, and it's not really effort, it's just the time it takes to sit in silence and let your thoughts go by and not overwhelm you, pretty soon those thoughts will just be mist passing in space. Those emotions will just be tides rising and falling. And you'll connect with yourself. You're the one that's sitting back, just watching those thoughts and realizing those thoughts aren't you. You're watching those tides rise and fall, and you realize those tides aren't you. And then you realize who you are. And when you realize who you realize that you are a beautiful, blessed child of God. It's hard to put into words, but it's like things happen in our life and we say to ourselves, man, how am I ever going to get through this? How am I ever going to get through that? And then as you start looking, you start realizing, you know what? God has gotten me through everything that I've ever been through. It might not be the way I expected to get through it, but I'm still standing and I'm still able to find some joy in life. So, and that's the therapy that makes you, at least makes me know that I'm going to be okay. And this is not going to subtract from suffering and the pain that I'm going to have to go through. But I guarantee, I know that I'm going to be okay. And it's something about just knowing that no matter what happens, I mean, even to the next world, I'm going to be okay. It's like I connected to the, I'm going to call it the eternity of being. I'm even more than just Lawrence. I'm an individual essence of God being expressed as Lawrence. But that individual essence has a choice of how it wants to respond to what God has created for me and what I've created for myself. So, and I find that if I respond from more, this is more kind of like a science, I don't want to say scientific. So words are kind of hard for me, you know, sometimes, but it's like, it's, oh man, it's like, it's just a healing that happens that I want to say makes life okay. So if my mind is telling me terrible things and my body is reacting in a terrible way, then I think I'm living backwards, because I think my mind is supposed to work for me and my body is supposed to work for me. So if I'm looking, so with the center in prayer, we're noticing that the thoughts and the stories come. So before the story would just come, but now I'm asking myself, why am I saying that? Why am I telling myself this story? And I'm realizing that, you know, the story is just something that I've created about God's creation, that if I can go to a higher level and maybe see it through God's eyes of love, I mean, it gets so difficult sometimes because, I get accused of just being this, Lawrence, you're always happy. You're always talking about good stuff. And it's not that. It's just that there's so much bad stuff that I could talk about, but there's no value in that for me. So, but if I talk about the good stuff kind of lifts someone else and it lifts me. And then the God that's in me that's feeling that, when God feels justified as being me, then I look at myself and I feel happy and I feel encouraged. If I'm telling myself another story, I'm feeling bad. And I think God is looking at me like, Lawrence, what's happening? I gave you this life and I gave you all this essence of, but you can create whatever you want to create with it. Why are you creating, this terrible? And it took me a while to realize that I was creating my own life.
So there you have it. 3 of the films anyway. And I'll let Dr. Limor take it from here. I'm hoping that Artist and Lawrence can speak directly as to why they chose these particular films. Maybe that's a good starting off point.
That is a good point. So if one of them want to jump in. Artist, take yourself off of mute.
Lawrence, you first.
Okay.
Well, I can get pretty long-winded sometimes, but it's just that, this practice has meant so much to my life, coming from a lot of turmoil. And, Ray was, I always felt that I had some type of connection and some type of relationship with God. But Ray was actually the first person that ever said, you can have an intimate relationship with God. And I'm like, an intimate relationship with God? Yes, where God is just speaking to you in a language that you can understand, And so that's why I picked the first one with Ray explaining how to get comfortable with the silence. Because when you first start, sometimes, like you say, there's a lot of afflicted thoughts that's going on in your mind. And once you realize that all you have to actually do is just sit there, like Ray says, and God does the work. So you're watching these thoughts pass by. It's like you and God sitting there watching it, and God is comforting you and healing you and letting you know that he's not holding you in any type of negative viewpoint. You're just one of his creations that he actually just adores and loves. And then you can start looking at your life from a different perspective. You know that you made some mistakes, but you're able to move on because God's love is ultimate and supreme. He can get you through anything. So, and the thing about the lifelong presence is, we go through a lot of stuff. And, as long as we can remember, take that time to center and come back to that, and God is always there. It's never God leaving us. It's always us going away from his presence. So if we can just come back to that presence and then we realize, God's got me through everything that happens. I mean, it's not going to, you might have to have some physical pain, some emotional turmoil, but God has got you. And some of our God having you, that's just, it's miraculous. It gets you through. And I forget, what was the other film? It was Lifelong Presence. And, I'm I'm getting older now, so my brain is changing. but I think you know what I'm saying, So with that, I just pass the artist and see what he wants to say about that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Lawrence. I chose I Am More, first of all, because I just I can listen to Lawrence talk just, for a long time. Sometimes we're on the phone and he keeps saying, well, I'll let you go, and I'm like, I'm trying to find things to talk about because if you just mention something, he has such spiritual insight. And I don't even think he realizes it because it's people who are around you that see the you that you really are, sometimes more so than we do. And we don't know the effect that we have on people really until they express it. But when we at Folsom, I would find things to talk about with Lawrence. And I remember my most memorable moment with you, Lawrence, where we were standing outside of the Greystone Chapel, and you know that white rose bush that's outside the chapel, and we were both standing there waiting for the group to come. We had about maybe 15, 20 minutes, and we were just talking, and we were both picking flowers, just like, and put them in our pocket and taking, and put them in our bag, and it was like this connection. We were just talking and picking flowers, and it felt like I was in a garden somewhere, and we weren't even in prison, to smell the roses, to feel the breeze on my skin. And I hear Lawrence talking, and we're just sitting there picking roses to take back to our cell. And I was like, wow, it's something special about you, Lawrence. And I just want you to know, man, you are loved and appreciated in a way that you may not even understand or comprehend. So I chose I Am More because I just want you to know that you inspire me on such a deep level. I mean, just your patience and your love and your wisdom is just such a treasure, man. And just to hear you talk and to express yourself, you say things that people don't have the courage to say, and sometimes they don't have the ability to articulate the emotion. And that's something that's just so valuable, and that's going to outlive each and every one of us. And I chose the I Am More because we are more, and we don't realize who we are. We don't realize what it is that we have. And sometimes individuals have to articulate that on our behalf so that we can get lined up with what that really is. And that puts us on the path. And that connects to Ray coming into, and the group coming into the prison and showing us that there's something greater, despite your change, despite your condition. There's something greater to reach for. And then it's not outside of yourself you're reaching for, but you're reaching inside.
That is absolutely wonderful. And I like the way I'm gonna say Lawrence being the wisdom person, and artist, a younger kind of mentee that have gleaned from you that's absolutely phenomenal. And I thank you, artists, for your words to Lawrence. And, we always like to say, we like to give people their props and their flowers while they can hear the smell of them. So we thank you for those encouraging words to Lawrence, and Lawrence encouraging inspiration to you. So that is wonderful. We have a few minutes for some questions, and right now I don't see any in our chat. So please put a question in our chat if you have any for Lawrence or Artist or Lizzie. We would appreciate you doing that so that we can, get any questions answered. But also, the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition is a place for resources. And so is the Prison Contemplative Fellowship. And so we like to make sure that we make those connections with everyone. So if there are any questions, okay, there is.
Yeah, I see Karen has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, it says, how can you encourage ministers to adopt this practice? And I just want to say that I have not facilitated centering prayer in prison. And I'm going to speak briefly about this, but we also have Chandra here from Contemplative Outreach. She works with the Prison Outreach Service Team, and she might have some more concrete suggestions as to how to do this. But as some of you who do work in prisons know that every prison is different, and every prison's programs is different. Some have few, some don't have any. And in terms of getting a program in there, it's very different by prison. I don't know the specifics to that, but that's what I've heard. But one of the things obviously would be to contact the prison chaplain to get hopefully, if they don't have a centering prayer practice, to suggest it, to perhaps, if you do have a centering prayer background, suggest that you conduct one, or if they do have one, to be invited to that and to use whoever's conducting that as a mentor for perhaps using it to continue in that prison or another prison. But Chandra, maybe you can also tell us specifically ideas on how people can do this in prisons.
Yeah, I would say I was well trained by my initial mentor when I was trying to get in, take the practice into the prison that I was already volunteering at. And that was Ray Leonardini, that the first and most important qualification for somebody to do this is to have your own practice. This isn't about sharing information. Ray is a gifted teacher and he's good at describing how the prayer works. But for those of us going inside, the number one thing is we bring the prayer because we practice the prayer. So that would be my first answer always. The other thing is to take advantage of the incredible resources that PCF has produced and the connections that those of us who are doing this are making, again, largely thanks to Ray. We have gotten started this prison contemplative, the prison outreach service team of contemplative outreach. Contemplative outreach is an organization that supports the practice of the prayer. And our prison outreach service team specifically supports very similar populations to PCF. And we are now having monthly Zoom meetings. A number of the folks that I see here are participating in our monthly Zoom meetings for people who are trying to get started doing this exactly. We have, for instance, Tom Cook has actually just started a group 6 months ago, and Kate and Linda, and there's a number of people that we get together a couple times a month, really, if you come to all the different offerings that we have, to talk about exactly these questions. What kind of roadblocks are we running into? How can we learn from each other's experiences? And we have Lawrence is on the service team, and Artist is involved in one of the working groups. And we're working hard to reach out to different formerly incarcerated folks. We're actually planning a retreat. If anybody knows formerly incarcerated folks who are practicing centering prayer who could benefit from this retreat, please have them get in touch with us. I'll put our website in the chat, but I would just say connect with other people who are trying to do it. We get requests from prisoners sometimes, and so we can try to hook people up with prisons that are wanting centering prayer. And it helps a lot to have other people to talk with who are trying to do similar things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. There is a question about to say more about the tablets and how to get them.
Prisons, not all prisons have tablets, and they decide on which type of hardware and what software that they want to include in those tablets. So again, every prison is different, and I don't think the majority of prisons have them. And I think I'm realizing that as a result of producing these DVDs. It seems that DVD technology is still much more prevalent in prisons in terms of showing the material. But what we're trying to do, and I think Chandra suggested this to me previously, was, if you're working in a prison, then just to ask them if they have tablets or can they get tablets. Tablets were introduced during COVID because people didn't have a way of communicating with their families or receiving money or correspondence. And then they expanded into providing educational opportunities for inmates. So, but again, it's slow in going. The Adovo, the platform we utilize, is still sort of getting up to speed in terms of how they organize their material and how to access it. So it's relatively new. It's something that we've just been encouraging people who are working in prisons to suggest and to continue to suggest to the prisons and to the administrators who are working there, because it is an option for these sorts of materials as well as many others.
Okay, thank you. And Chandra put in the information about the centering information, centering cpprisonOutreach.org. So you can reference that particular website. Also, I know one comment that came across was about how Riverside Church is using centering prayer in their worship. So I think that's it's something that in these turbulent times that we live in, centering prayer can help all of us. And like what Chandra was saying is, we bring the prayer that we practice to others. And so by Lawrence being that example, and to artists, then, that kind of brought them together. And that's just a wonderful example of how we connect in those ways. And it's a kind of I like to say, a peace, or we get it from a peace that surpasses all understanding. We can go through turmoil or whatever we're going through, but that centering helps us bring us to that peace that we need to get through life. There's a comment to artists and Lawrence. If you were writing a statement to draw people to a prison program, what would you say that you think might pique interest to show up and try it out? Great question. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kate.
Yes, definitely. If there's something to draw people in or writing a statement, what would you say to bring people to this program?
I would say, I would use the words of Jesus when people were asking, what can they do to serve him? He said, if you love me, you consider the least of these. He said, when I was hungry, you fed me, and when I was in prison, you visited me, and to complete your spiritual practice in any way, you have to reach back into the lowest levels of society and pull people up. And I'm reminded of also when someone was asking Jesus, to be healed, and Jesus told him, go bathe in the River Jordan. And the River Jordan is a place where all the refuge of the city run off, the sewage, people wash their clothes. It's filthy. And the thing is, well, how can you be healed by bathing in the filth? And the truth is, that's where your deliverance is, because if it wasn't for the grace of God, we'd all be in the River Jordan. We'd all be filthy, so it's remembering that we're all connected, each and every one of us. And just because we're a different culture, or our skin tone or hue is different, doesn't mean we're separate from this human experience. And understanding that the human experience supersedes any race, any religion, any belief, to reach down into the lowest parts of us and to pull us up. Also like the parable of Jesus being born in a manger. A manger is a filthy place. There was no running water. It's where the animals use the bathroom, the same place where they ate. It stinks. It's cesspool for just biological matter that we don't even want anywhere near us. But how is it that the savior of the world was born in a poop house?
Thank you, Ernest. What about you, Lawrence? Quickly, one quick, what would you tell people? How would you bring people to the program?
I would say, see how that wisdom works. It wasn't just me imparting wisdom to artists. I mean, his spirit and his energy. The main thing that I would say is that what I found to be the most rewarding thing is that connecting, just through the practice, the actual, like Chandra was saying, doing the practice, something will come through and will connect you with your spirit. And once you start connecting with your spirit, you will want to stay connected. And that's the transformative effect, because you're not going to do anything that's like outside of that connection, which you realize that everyone has this essence of light and love inside of them. The contrast of life causes us to go through different changes and present different ways. But underneath that is that God essence of love. And also, I like to say that for people that are getting out of prison or are out of prison to have a center and prayer practice, we do have outside the walls center and prayer group that we do by Zoom, and anybody in the whole country can access this and be a part of this group and gain from the benefits of staying centered and staying connected with people that are centered. I'll leave it with that.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us on today. This is kind of a conversation that we probably need to revisit again next year, as we're thinking about how to bring these kind of resources to you. And we didn't get to all the questions, but we want to make sure that anything that's in the chat that we kind of connect with Lizzie or artists or Lawrence, to make sure that we get those questions answered to you either via email or whatever. Kara, do you want to put up I just have a few announcements before I let you go on today. Where would we be without announcements, right? Always have those last announcements. in church as we're doing that. I have to make our announcements about what's coming up. And so today we would like to remind you that on November 9th, we have the spiritual work of racial justice with Dr. Patrick St. John, Dr. Patrick St. John, who is a Jesuit, about racism, and including a discussion on his book, The Crucible of Racism, Ignatian Spirituality and the Power of Hope. So please join us on next Wednesday at the times that we did on today. The other next town hall meeting, that's a webinar. The next town hall meeting, Healing After Abortion. The causes and effects of abortions are steeped in various forms of trauma, and that will take place on November 17th with Dr. Martha Shupin, and that, again, the same times as we are on today. And there's one last thing that we need your input on. There's a material needs survey that we want to hear from you. And so there are couple questions that we need answered. And if you can scan that QR code and submit your answers to us, then that way it helps us to know how we can support you in your ministry. So please do that. 3 simple questions. And so we would appreciate your feedback on that. Scan the QR code, or if need be, you can email us, or I'm sure it's on the website also. So please do that so that we can help in programming as we go forth in 2023. Again, I thank you all for joining us for our monthly town hall. And we thank you for spending that time. We thank Lizzie and Lawrence and Artis and Chandra for joining us and giving their input and sharing this important practice of contemplative prayer with us and how it has enhanced and enriched their lives. Have a blessed week. If we don't see you anymore during the month, we hope we will. And I might not be facilitating, but have a blessed Thanksgiving. Take care.
Always. Love, 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 everyone. Love, love,
Amen.
love.